Hello, it appears to be 11 o'clock on Sunday in Singapore, and I'm excited to be here. Some of you may not have that opportunity to be on live, or it may be a better time for you. So, at any rate, we're going to have fun today. So, I'm going to wait just a minute and gather my oils. If you haven't gathered any oils, the ones that I'm going to use today for me, and you can use anything you choose. I'm going to use Joy Blend, Inner Child, Highest Potential, and of course I'll probably end with Believe. Anyone who knows me knows that Believe is something that I can't do without. I'm kind of addicted to it. But at any rate, thank you for those of you who are here live, and also thank you for anyone who is going to watch this as a replay. So, when I thought about the topic for today, and it seemed like, wow, Gary Young stories, and it seems to be well received, and I don't know how many. I've made some notes and jotted down a few things for myself. I don't know how many I'll get through, and it will be kind of emotional for me because those of you who have ever been in Gary Young's presence know how he connects with you on all levels. It's not just being there in front of you and talking. It's not just what he says. It's the energy behind what he says and does. I'm sorry, I've got my tissues here. Many of the times that I've been with Gary have been very, very emotional for me, and just thinking about them brings that all back into focus. So, the first thing, as I said, I'm going to apply joy. When I think of Gary, I automatically think of joy. I remember one of the first times that I ever heard him speak. He said, if I'm ever in a position to get a crop duster, I want to spray the world with joy. And in actuality, that is exactly what he's doing, because each one of us is literally spraying the world with joy using his oils. Would you agree? So, mission accomplished, number one. The next oil that I'm going to use today for me is Inner Child, because when I think of Gary, I always think of this little inner child. He is absolutely an amazing person who accomplishes so much, and he always remembers to have fun while he's doing it. So let's get our inner childs working here for us, wherever you'd like to apply these oils. Don't forget to breathe them in. I forgot to breathe in my joy, so I need to make sure that I'm in a joyful place. And next I'm going to use Highest Potential. And Highest Potential, when Gary created this, he said that this was his favorite oil, and for many years he used it as his personal cologne, and every single day multiple times. So each one of us choosing to reach our highest potential, that's a great goal, isn't it? So let's see, I jotted down just a few things, starting way back. So I'm going to start there. I don't know, as I said earlier, how many I will get through. I may skip over a lot. This may be a series. We never know. But at any rate, I first met Gary, in 2008. I had been in Singapore for 5 years, and I finally made silver. Does that make any of you feel a little better to know that it took me actually 8 years to get to be silver, okay, for the first time, not on and on. So I finally did make silver, and I won a place on the cruise. This was a Caribbean cruise, and I was living in Singapore, and I was the next to the last qualifier. I wasn't one of the top ones. So I had to pay my own airfare. I had to share a room with someone I'd never met. But I chose to do this, and that airfare was really a struggle for me to find that. And I went to the cruise for two main reasons. First of all, I wanted to make sure that all of the executives who could not get off the ship at night would recognize that Asia was here, okay? But I also really, really wanted to have a picture with Gary Young that I could bring back so that I could show people in Singapore he was really a real person. He wasn't just a figment of my imagination. So when I got to the cruise, the first thing I found out was that there had been a problem with the dam in Ecuador at the farm. And at the last minute, Gary had to cancel and was not able to be there. Well, I was really devastated. However, life goes on, and I found out that he was going to be in Australia. So I came home from Florida, from where I flew out of. I came home from the cruise, had 4 days in Singapore, and flew to Australia. And there, everyone surrounded Gary at all times, and I just wanted that picture. So I had somebody standing there with the camera, and I asked if I could just get up behind Gary and if they could get me in the screen, and maybe we would have a picture. And Gary saw me, and he turned around and put his arm around me, and I have my picture. So it's one of my treasured pictures from 2008. And he stood there and talked with me with all these other people waiting. He just talked with me, and here I was, not one of the stars. I was not one of the people that anybody knew, but he took the time to talk with me. And then the next day now this was in Australia in May. It's getting pretty cold in May in Australia, at least for someone who lives in Singapore. And we had a beach walk that morning. Well, I hit on everything that I could possibly layer over my body because I was freezing to death with gloves. And there's Gary out there with Jacob, and they're running down the beach, and they ran right into the water, just having the best time. So there was that little inner child taking time to spend with his child as well. So it gave me another glimpse of who this man really, really is, how powerful he is. So let's see, what was the next thing I had? Oh, yes, in 2010, I made up my mind because I had never been to Ecuador, to the farm and to his clinic there. And I made up my mind that if I got to go to the auction, I was going to purchase a week at the clinic. And I got into a bidding war with someone, and this was someone who could really outbid me. And I said, I'm going to do this. I don't know how I will pay for it. Well, it was the most wonderful. I did get this. And I went, and Gary was there, and he took me on a private farm tour in the car. Well, this was just one of those exciting things that, I had private time with Gary Young. He also personally did my live blood. And he said, when he's doing the blood, I had heard him say before that, show me someone's blood, and I can tell you everything about them. Well, he told me things that were very, very true, that had happened long ago, that I had never told anyone. So he was absolutely right about that. So at any rate, while we're on our farm tour, here we are in the truck, and every now and then Gary would jump out, and he'd pick up a leaf, and he'd come back and say, smell this, and I would dutifully smell it. And he said, what is it? Ooh, wow. Well, I did identify oregano. That was about the only thing until he gave me a 2-liter beaker of ylang-ylang essential oil. I also recognized that. So patiently, though, he would still get out and get more leaves and come and show me and rub them in his hands, rub them on mine. Just so incredible amount of patience that he showed and caring. Just because I couldn't tell all of the things that he can, Gary is one of the few people that they call a nose, who can smell an oil and actually determine the percentage of the compounds that are in there. Wow. Chemists have checked up on him, and he's absolutely correct every time, because he truly can smell and sense exactly what's in an essential oil. And that's why he has worked so hard to give us these incredible precious oils that we have. So they have been truly a gift from Gary. So moving on forward, it was really nice to have that first week at the clinic where I learned about everything, where it was, because the following year, in 2011, I did manage to go to Ecuador for the retreat. So I was really excited about this. Unfortunately, the day before the retreat started, I discovered the trampoline that was, there for Jacob and Joseph. And that was when I had my trampoline adventure, playing on the trampoline, which was such fun, and fractured my spine. So while I was in the hospital, Gary came to see me every day. He worked with the doctors. And to really give you an idea of what he said, I'll never forget this as long as I live, because the doctors were telling me that I would never walk again and that I needed to have immediate surgery and body cast for 3 months. And Gary held my hand, and they said that I needed that surgery immediately. And Gary held my hand. I'm flat on my back, and he looked me straight in the eyes. And he said, "Frances, this is a decision that only you can make. The doctors can't make it. Your daughters can't make it. I can't make it. So don't let anyone rush you. Get very connected with your Creator. And when you are ready, when you are very clear, make your decision." That was something that as I said, I will never forget, because it took the pressure off of having to make that decision right away when I wasn't quite ready, although I was ready, because without breaking eye contact, he continued holding my hand, and I asked him, "I have one question." And he said, "What is that?" And I said, "Will you oversee my treatment protocol?" And he didn't answer me right away. We just looked at each other. And finally he nodded yes. And I said, "The decision is made." And I'm so grateful that I didn't have that surgery, didn't have that body cast, but more than that, I'm grateful for that connection with Gary Young, because I do walk. I did walk within a week. I had no pain whatever within 3 months and no restrictions. So I'm so very, very grateful for that opportunity to spend time with him. That was probably even more of a major thing in my life than the actual recovery process. So at any rate, Then we moved on along. We had the grand opening of the Singapore office in October. Yes, I was walking. Yes, I was able to get up on stage. And yes, we did the ribbon cutting, which this was really, really special to me. Now that I think back, I hadn't thought of this before. There really were not that many ribbon cuttings prior to the Singapore opening because there weren't that many Young Living offices across the world. There was very few international. There was an office in Australia, and that may have been the only international one at the time. So at any rate, when we had the ribbon cutting, Gary cut the ribbon, and he could have walked right into the office because he unlocked the door. They gave him the key, and he unlocked the door. And he unlocked it and opened it and said, "Francis, enter your office." Well, it isn't my office, but it was something that I worked very hard to and intended to have it happen. So he acknowledged that because he is so sensitive to what is going on around him with all of the things that he does. He's so very, very sensitive to each person. If any of you have ever seen him in a big group, there are hundreds of people around him at all times, and they're all asking questions. He patiently answers each one, everyone who gets to him, even though he may have answered the same question hundreds of times, thousands of times. He looks you in the eye, and he gives you that time and makes you feel special and not stupid, like when I couldn't even identify anything but oregano leaves. They are pretty potent and their aroma. I probably could now identify Dorado Azul because it really has a strong aroma, and I now can also identify juniper, I'm sure. So at any rate, just attempting to give you that glimpse of who Gary is, what he has done, what he does every single day. When we had convention in 2012, I was presented as a diamond and the only one in the company that year. So he made it unbelievably special because there were members from Singapore who came over. That was a long trip for those of us in Singapore. This was before the office actually opened, because this was in June no, it was after the office, I apologize. This was in 2012. But there were a few from Singapore who came over, and they were so excited and came rushing down toward the stage and taking pictures. And Gary, just on the spur of the moment, with all of the things that go on at convention, he said, he says, I want all of you who from Singapore, all of Francis' team, to come up here on stage. And that was another photo that I will never, ever forget. It was one of those moments that, those stellar moments that stick out in your life, because there we were, and Gary even was holding the baby of one of our members who had traveled there with her infant. So he's always thinking about us and always sensitive to how he can make things better. So I have a bunch of other things that I can talk about. However, I'm going to only bring up one more thing, and that is a fun thing, because in 2013, we went to Oman with Gary Young. Oh, wow. What an incredible trip. An opportunity to spend time in Oman, going down the frankincense trail, going through the sand dunes. Actually, we were able to plant our own Boswellia sacra trees and go, and he took us on a tour of the little distillery in Oman. You would not believe the size of that distillery that produces our sacred frankincense, our Boswellia sacra essential oil. And Kai and I were outside because they were taking videos of us planting our trees. And we missed the tour that Gary did with everyone else. So when we came in, we were a little disappointed because we didn't get to be part of that education. And Gary realized this, and he gave us our private tour. And he anointed us. He actually poured that frankincense water, floral water, right over our heads. He said, hold out your hands. And he just poured it over our hands and said, now wash your face with it. So he took the time. And that's one of the things that has made the greatest impression upon me of anything. He always makes time when it's really important. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, because I am over 20 minutes already, and actually I'm going to close the computer and go straight to the airport again. This is as I did once before. So at any rate, while we were in Oman, he took us out into the sand dunes. We had four-wheel drives. This is a long story, so I will just cut it to this last thing. And we're driving out there, the wind is blowing, and Mary leaned over. That day I got to be in the car that Gary drove, and Mary was in the front seat. I was in the back seat, and I heard her quietly say to Gary, because we're not on roads, we're in sand, we're in the desert. And Mary said, how long will these tracks remain? And Gary looked around. He said, well, with this wind, maybe 12, 13 minutes. Well, we were going to be gone a lot more than 12 or 13 minutes. So in other words, we would have no way of really finding our way back except for Gary. And of course, Gary's intuition, always right on target. And we went out there, we climbed the sand dunes. We had a wonderful, wonderful experience out there, and came back, and it was just one of those times that you treasure for the rest of your life. So the thing that I'd like to leave you with that I was thinking about is that Gary Young always believes in what he's doing, and he commits 100% to it. In fact, the best way to make sure that something gets done is to tell Gary that it is impossible. Okay? If he is committed and you tell him that it is impossible, he will make sure that it is done. So, how does he do it? He first believes that it can be done. He believes it in his heart. He believes it with every fiber of his being. And then he never, ever, ever gives up. So, join me with I Believe shower. This one's for you, Gary. And thank you for listening to all my reminiscing today. And I look forward to being with you again next week. Bye-bye.